Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Bienvenue à la réunion numéro.
Welcome to meeting number 90 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics.
Pursuant to Standing Order 1083H and the motion adopted by the committee on Wednesday, October 18th, 2023, the committee is commencing its study of allegations related to governance and management of contributions by Sustainable Development Technologies Canada. La réunion aujourd'hui se déroule sur.
Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders. Members can attend in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application.
Before the meeting starts, a couple of comments for the benefits of the witnesses and the members. First, I'd like to remind members, all members and witnesses, that care must be taken with regard to the earpieces for interpretation. Please be mindful not to place your earpiece near the microphone, as this can result in a feedback loop which may cause acoustic shock, which can in turn cause injury to the interpreters. And a reminder that comments between members should be addressed through the chair. So with that, I'd now like to welcome our witnesses today from the Department of Industry, the Honourable François-Philippe Champagne, Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry, and Mr. Simon Kennedy, who's the Deputy Minister. Welcome, gentlemen, to the committee. Minister, you have 5 minutes to address the committee. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to members of the committees for inviting me and to be the first one to address that. Comme vous le savez, plus tôt cette année.
As you know, earlier this year, my department was informed of allegations against Sustainable Development Technologies Canada, SDTC in English. Let's be clear. I expect that all organizations that we give funds to act with diligence, care, and integrity in all aspects of their job.
I asked my department to immediately conduct a fact-finding exercise to an impartial third party, Raymond Chabot Grant Thornton. The fact-finding report found no clear evidence of willful misconduct, but did identify a number of instances in which STDC was not in full compliance with its contribution agreement, and I quote, a number of inconsistencies and opportunities for improvement. And let's be clear, our government will always hold all organizations that receive public funds to the highest standards. C'est pour cette raison que nous avons exigé que des mesures.
This is why we required additional action after the report. These measures include an action plan that were sent to management in order to solve the issues identified in the report, and I expect that these changes be applied by the 31st of December 2023. We have also temporarily suspended the funding of new projects until these corrective measures are implemented. There were also allegations on HR management practices. Given the independent status of SDTC, the Raymond Chabot Grant Thornton wasn't able to examine this issue directly.
So Raymond Chabot Grant Thornton did observe what appeared to be inconsistencies and areas of improvements in human resources practices at STDC. Of note, allegations have recently come to my attention that there might be additional former employees who may wish to provide evidence of inappropriate behavior, but feel they cannot do so without exposing themselves to liability. We will not allow these concerns to go unanswered. My department cannot unilaterally take on this task. The Canada Foundation for Sustainable Development Technology Act establishes STDC as an arm's-length organization. The responsibility for human resources falls with the independent board of directors. C'est pour cette raison que mon ministère a demandé à.
That is why my department asked STDC to take the necessary measures in order to carry out an in-depth assessment of allegations on the management of human resources. This assessment will be led by an independent group of experts that will send me their conclusions afterwards.
And former employees to freely speak to this third-party independent law firm without violating any applicable settlement agreements or non-disclosure agreements. Les allégations de mauvaise gestion des fonds publics sont graves et il est important que nous agissions.
The allegations of mismanagement are serious. It is important for us to act quickly, but also to have reasonable due diligence. We need to base our actions on facts.
Due process and due diligence continue to guide these next steps. I also remain fully committed to exploring these allegations. In addition to ISED's efforts, Mr. Chair, we have been working closely with the Office of the Auditor General on this matter for a number of weeks. I welcome the Auditor General of Canada's decision to conduct an audit, and my department will cooperate fully with her work. In conclusion, Mr. Chair, I am confident that we have taken all appropriate actions with the implementation of corrective measures, the pending independent review of STDC Human Resources Management, and the Auditor General of Canada audit. Let me be clear, I am prepared to take any further action as required under the circumstances. With that, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to answer questions from my esteemed colleagues.
Okay, thank you, Minister. Just like in previous interventions, we're kind of old school around here. Things don't have to go through the chair. So if members want to direct their questions directly to the minister, I'll accept that. The other thing that I'm going to suggest as well is that we keep it relevant to the discussion at hand, and less interruptions, the better. Members have 6 minutes in the first round. They're allowed to ask and use that time in whatever way they choose to, so I'm going to enforce that. Minister, thank you again. Mr. Barrett, you have 6 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thanks very much, Chair. Minister, under Section 10 of the Act, you have the power to fire the chair and to fire the board. You just said in your opening statement that you'd taken all reasonable steps. I haven't heard yet that you fired anyone. Who have you fired?
I work on the basis of evidence. I'm a lawyer, and I would certainly caution members of this committee to apply due process when they're looking at allegations. That's why we have, the moment that was made aware of allegations, we had a third party to come to do a full investigation and report back to me.
Right.
And in addition to that now, there'll be a third party law firm to which whistleblower can go and report their findings.
Do you believe the whistleblowers, Minister?
Sorry?
Do you believe the whistleblowers? Your department has been briefed at length. The PCO has been briefed at length. Very simple question, yes or no. Do you believe them?
Well, listen, I believe in the evidence that I receive, and the evidence that I have so far is contained in the report for which you have a copy. That's the evidence that I have in front of me today.
Will you condemn Sustainable Development Technologies Canada for saying that the whistleblowers are lying?
I will
You said that there should be due process. So they've already determined that what the whistleblowers are saying, in their opinion, is a lie. Do you think that that's appropriate of SDTC to say?
I think you'll have the opportunity to ask that question to the chair and to the CEO of the company.
Well,
I'll let them speak for themselves.
With all due respect, I'm asking you. You're the minister.
No, but I think the question is for the CEO and the board if they said that. What I'm saying is that me as minister, I work under the terms and conditions of the contribution agreement, which you've seen.
Right.
I work on the basis of the law which created STDC.
Right, and that law allows you that gives you the power to both appoint the chair and members of the board, which you haven't exercised the ability to fire them. Their term is based on good behavior. I have another question.
Well, let me just say, it's for cause, Mr. Barrett. They can be terminated for cause. So
yeah, their term is for good behavior. What we've heard,
but
sir,
for cause.
is what we've heard is their term is for good behavior. They're appointed. And it's based on the minister's decision. That's you. So are you going to guarantee the whistleblowers the same level of protection offered to public servants?
Well, the law specifically, and it's not me, as you would know, you would go back into the Act. Those employees are not part of the Public Service of Canada, sir. That's not me. That's the law that Parliament adopted at the time.
I could take some time to offer you some suggestions that would include appointing a chair and appointing members of the board who would guarantee the protection of whistleblowers who've identified gross mismanagement and misconduct when we're talking about more than $100 million in funding. So will you admit today that SDTC has seen rampant corruption through conflicts of interest and funding ineligible companies and projects? You talked about the RCGT report. That's listed in there. So will you confirm that you agree with that finding?
Well, I would say I find you're making a number of assumptions. As a lawyer, I would caution you to do that. The only evidence that exists on the record today is in the Raymond Chabot Grant Thornton report. That's the only evidence that exists today. If you are in possession, no, but let me say to you, if you're in possession of further evidence, I would welcome you to deliver that to me.
Minister,
and then we
in
can
fact,
have a fact-finding exercise.
you're in possession of the same information I am. It's more than 300 pages that the whistleblowers gave to PCO and furnished your department with.
I am not in possession of that document. What I'm saying, I'm in possession.
You should. I'm asking my next question. You should turn to your officials and ask if this is willful blindness that we're seeing, because they've been furnished with the information. In fact, we have members of your department in recordings that have been released to the public saying that they've seen the information and that they don't have confidence in the board of directors. So. Let's be clear. I'm not here for your legal opinion. You're offering me legal advice. I don't need your legal cautions. What I want to know is the date on which you learned of the whistleblower allegations about SDTC. Just the date, sir.
March 5th.
After the government learned, after you learned of Annette Verscharen's network of conflicts of interest and involvement in funding ineligible projects, did she receive any taxpayer dollars? Yes or no?
I don't understand the question you have. What I can tell you is that on March 5th, no, but if you want me to answer, I know you have another question. But
I do have a question, and you said you don't understand it. How can you answer it if you don't understand it?
No, but I'm just going back to your question on March 5th.
Is the chair of the board. You have the power to fire her. We have heard evidence that Ms. Verscharen is in a conflict of interest and that her company has continued to receive funding, including the Verscharen Center receiving $1 million on September the 5th and $1.2 million on September 19th. Did you offer any comments that were supportive of the funding that the Verscharen Center, named for the chair of the board, who serves at the minister's pleasure, did you offer positive comments about that funding, already knowing about the allegations against Ms. Verscharen?
I see where you're trying to make inference and allegations and all that, sir. Let me make things very simple for you. I learned on March 5th, that's what at the time I was briefed by my official.
Yep, that
on March
comes
17th,
before September 5th. Yep.
Mr. Chair, if you want, I'm happy to hear the question, but if I'm not able to answer,
I was just going to say, let the minister answer
I'm a lawyer.
Mr. Barrett, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Because if you want me to answer, give me the opportunity.
Let's hear it.
So what I'm telling you is that on March 5th, this is the time I was briefed by official. On March 17th, the department issued a contract to Raymond Chabot to do the investigation. On September 27th, I got the findings of that. On October 3rd, that's where
I've got 10 seconds left, Minister. I would just say you heard about it on September, or you heard about it in March. Then in September, you went on to give positive praise for more funding to Ms. Verscharen, who's at the heart of these conflict of interest allegations. You have the power to fire the chair. You have the power to fire the board. Why haven't you fired anyone?
Mr. Chair, I would really...
Minister, that concludes this round of questioning. You went over by about 10 seconds, according to our colleagues in the Liberals. Madame Fortier, vous avez 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît, à la ministre.
Merci beaucoup d'être ici.
Thank you for being with us, Minister Champagne. We appreciate you being here to share your observations with us, but also your action plan. That will be my first question. During your presentation, you had the opportunity to share some of the actions that you will be taking. Are there any others that you would like to share? We know that with the report that you saw, you chose to suspend funding for new programs. We would like to understand other actions that you intend to take. Thank you, Madame Fortier, for the question. And this is what I was trying to say to our esteemed colleague, Mr. Barrett. The most important action, and the one that was taken, is to suspend any funding. And so we need to be clear on this today. With the contribution agreement, we have the obligations of the minister in the contract. And the legislation also has a framework. This is an independent board with a CEO. And when I was made aware of these allegations on March 5th, I asked a few days later, March 17th, that we hire a law firm to shed a light on what had happened. There are a lot of procedural matters to get through, and so we need to be careful with what we're saying, because we're only talking about allegations. Nothing has been proven so far. And what we saw in the Raymond Chabot report, they talk about inconsistencies and opportunities for improvement. That's what we have. And so, after that, we asked for corrective measures to be implemented by that organizations. And there were other allegations in the media afterwards. And so I asked if there was any other proof or information they would be able to speak with this law firm that would be able to analyze the facts. And afterwards, we would be able to take appropriate measures. I want to get to the heart of the issue. And in order to do so, I am taking all of the necessary measures. And if there are additional measures to take, then we will do that. You talked about the media and what was shared by Radio-Canada and officials that were talking about how you might react to the Raymond Chabot Grant Thornton report. And I would like for you to be able to explain what your reactions were to the report. I saw that article when I was abroad, and officials said that I would react strongly. And when we're talking about allegations that have to do with mismanagement or public funds and ethical matters, people know me. We have a very rigorous approach. And people were saying, when the minister hears about this, he will take the appropriate steps to remedy the problem. But even to get to the heart of the issue, we need to do it the right way. There are a lot of people that are jumping to conclusions here, and we need to be careful because there are rights and obligations, and I want to have access to all of the information. If there are members of the committee that have information that I don't have, you can share it with me so we can take appropriate measures. That is why we're working with a law firm that will allow us to really examine the issue in depth.
Excellent. Merci. Alors,
my next question. I imagine that you are currently in discussions with SDTC. Do you know if they've accepted or have tried to improve the situation after the report? And do you believe that SDDC has done enough in order to improve the situation? Thank you for the question. I haven't communicated with SDTC for a long time, months if not years. That's done through officials, so I haven't spoken to the chair of the board or the chair of the organization. That's being done through the officials, and I think that's the right way for things to be done. I have to say that for the sake of transparency, when we ask to open the books and we have rights with the contribution agreement, and so when we asked to have a process that would allow employees to speak freely, they agreed. And I think that is in the spirit of transparency and good governance that things need to be done this way, and I hope that the committee will hear from them. When we asked in the action plan, we asked them to have corrective measures, and they responded positively because in the report there were areas of improvement. And as a lawyer and as a minister, I expect that the highest standards be applied in organizations receiving public funds. And I'll say this in front of everyone. Canadians are watching us. I am ready to take all appropriate measures for us to get to the bottom of things and to ensure transparency and that people feel reassured. And if there are employees that have any facts or information to share, well, we have created a process that will allow them to do so because we need to shed a light on what happened. This organization has existed since 2001 and has helped over 500 companies. And so we need to be careful to preserve what needs to be preserved. Thank you, Mr. Minister. Thank you, Madame Fortier. I gave you 13 additional seconds. Mr. Villemur, you have the floor for 6 minutes and 10 seconds. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Minister, for being with us today. You are well placed in the government, and I will ask you questions on this. If we look at incidents over the past years, it's as if the government was not able to govern administratively. They're often subcontracting their obligations to third parties, for example, SDTC. And it's similar to what we saw with ArriveCan and the We Charity. So, the subcontracting of government services. The issue that I see with this, and I would like to hear your opinion on it, this subcontracting shelters the government from accountability or doesn't offer transparency that would be subject to federal departments. And so with a lack of transparency and accountability, how can we do our work here? Thank you for your question. It's not my choice. The Parliament in 2001 adopted legislation. SDTC was chosen given legislation approved by the government at the time. They wanted some independence and transparency. That's in the legislation. That's not me saying this. It's a choice that was made by parliamentarians at the time. And Parliament adopted a legislation with different measures. And remember, some were saying that they wanted more independence. They didn't want these funds to be managed by the government. That's what Parliament had chosen at the time. And that's why I'm coming back to Mr. Barrett's colleagues and comments and saying that we need to be careful. It's in the legislation. It's not the minister that decides. And the contribution agreement lists the rights of the minister. And so following allegations, in this case, we required that the organization open their books and shared their HR practices. But in the legislation, it's up to that board and not up to the department and the minister. And so between wanting independence and with the other elements that I mentioned earlier, ArriveCan, We Charity, well, it seems a little bit risky to have that kind of proposal. You could say that there are cases where there weren't any issues, and I agree, but is this perhaps an issue to have public funds administered by third parties? I think that we need to be cautious, and for SDTC, it's perhaps a lesser known organization, but they fund the most projects in clean tech, 500 companies, and they removed 7 million cars on the roads. We're talking about 20 million jobs since 2001. And I'm not saying this as a minister. As parliamentarians, we can say that it worked pretty well for a long time. And the regulatory framework and legal framework and I don't want to name organizations, but there were a lot of organizations in the different members' ridings, and over 20 years, people benefited from this legislation. I don't think that we can mix STDC with other contracts. All right, I will talk about your department now. Our committee asked for a document that was unredacted from Raymond Chabot, Grant Thornton, and we received a redacted document. I think that they're avoiding their commitments. I understand the requirements of protecting privacy, but in this case, a redaction like this stops me from understanding the core of the issue. And there are less aggressive ways of anonymizing reports. And this is not a bad judgment here. I want to understand what happened, and the report doesn't allow me to do so. I am for transparency. There was a matter of health and safety for employees that were threatened. And so, as a minister, and the deputy minister can talk about this as well, we had to act with caution. We needed to protect privacy, but we also heard that threats had been made towards certain individuals. And so we had to be cautious. And I say this as a parliamentarian, we need to be aware of this. If there's a way to submit it in camera or in another way, I am all for the sharing of this document. I want to get to the heart of things, but I want to do things correctly while respecting procedural equity, but also health and safety. Because when I heard that some were threatened, well, we need to be aware as parliamentarians that we want to get to the heart of the issue, but we want to do it well. But if you use Mr. A, Mr. B, Mr. C, Company A, B, C, we could have followed the logic there. We are trying to do things well. And so if you're saying that you want to see Company ABC, that's fine. But the issue was really the health and safety of some employees that were worried about their safety. Thank you, Mr. Villemur. Thank you, Mr. Minister. We gave you a good 10-15 seconds, Mr. Villemur. Inaudible.
Seconds, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here, Mr. Minister. I don't believe using the Canada Foundation Sustainability Act as a shield is appropriate. I spoke on that legislation, and I knew that the vulnerabilities is really about creating another element outside the government so workers can't actually get the same treatment and supports as a federal public servant. So my first question to you would be, Mr. Minister, will you guarantee all the current employees an equivalent position in the federal civil service if they come forward, if they feel that they are not being treated right now? Will you guarantee that them and their families will actually be there in terms of employment and confidentiality will be able to be expressed because they're at risk? So will you guarantee those individuals
I
their
hear your
jobs?
question. I cannot change the act, that's for sure. But what I can do and what we have provided.
Well, you can change the act, actually. We can actually put an all-party motion forward and actually do that, which will craft that and get it ready. So we can actually change the act to protect these people.
Listen, I was talking about the current version, but obviously,
I am too. We can change it.
I agree with you. Parliament could make an amendment and change that. But what we did in the meantime, because I think we're talking about an actual issue with real people having real allegations. What we did, which I think is the best thing that we can do under the circumstances today, is to make sure that we have a process where we demanded and obtained from STDC that they will relieve people from their confidentiality obligation, whatever they might be.
Yeah, but I'm looking for so I've talked to some of the former employees, and I can hear it in their voices. Very much disconcerting in terms of what's taking place there, and I can hear it in their voices about their concern about their current people that are certainly still being there employed. Mm-hmm. So what can you offer those people, aside from a private law firm outside, what can you take away from right now is we at least go away from this meeting and look at guaranteeing their employment within the public service as an equivalent position so we can actually get to the bottom of this. And the legislation can be changed, but in the meantime, we have to do something for them and their families. We're talking about a lot of money here.
Listen, I could. That's why I did. Yeah. Listen, you're talking to the person who acted. There was people who were talking. I did that. I took action from the moment there was allegation. And as you know, there's a history of that. I'm the first one to act on something.
No, and I appreciate
when I got
that, but these people need their jobs.
No, I appreciate, but what I'm saying, Mr. Massé, is that I acted immediately to have a report, so we have a factual basis, the Raymond Chabot report, which is, by the way, for colleagues.
That's great, but that's way out there for them. That's not every day. People have to go into this agency as this is being ground out in the public. They have to get up and go into this environment and actually have to try to produce for us, and on top of that, deal with their own repercussions of this going. So I'm looking for guarantees on how do we protect those people, specific guarantees.
And I appreciate it, and that's what we did. We said because today, my understanding as a lawyer of the situation as you see it, is that some of them have been refrained from being able to bring forward because their allegation because of concern with respect to non-disclosure agreement, or even settlement agreements. What we demanded and obtained from STD, because, we're not managing human resources here. You're talking to the minister. This is done by the board and the management of STDC.
Yeah, all
with
politically
respect.
appointed through a process.
It's not the minister.
No,
this is
but
human resources.
This is not an entitlement to be the director there and board member. It's not an entitlement. It's a privilege.
I agree with you.
And what I can control at this point here, and I think we can all control here, is protecting these workers at this point in time. And so
that's what, if I may, Mr. Chair, that's the best way to do that today. Consulting with legal advice that we received, the best way we can do today. I agree with you. I feel for these people every day. I want to get to the bottom of this more than anyone else here, because actually all of what you see is because I took action. So what we receive as legal advice is to say the best way is to have a third-party law firm where they don't have to tell that to their management. They'll be relieved from any covenants or the restrictions that they have. They can tell their full story. The law firm will then produce a report to the minister. And then on the basis of any additional evidence that I receive, we will take further action, including, like you said, with respect to the board and the management of the company. But first, we need to have a fact-finding mission that needs to be done in accordance with due process.
I do appreciate those efforts, but these people have to live through this. And they have to continue to live through the process that you just described by no fault of their own, going into an environment that's not functional in many respects, even if we want to debate it. So what we could do, though, is at least guarantee some type of equivalency in the public service. We've done this before. I worked with Minister Stockwell Day at the time when we went to arm the border guards. And one of the things that we did was we actually made sure that people didn't get laid off or who lost their job. They would be their equivalency move. Now we've created an establishment here through the legislation, so it is so-called arm's length, which I've seen many times over here. They're either within choking distance of a minister or not, or they're arm's length at different times. It depends upon the situation. But why can't we do something here to guarantee the employment of those individuals that are currently there, so they can either transfer out or they can actually get some protection that's more than just what you're offering? And I do appreciate you offered that, but again, they have to live through that for the next 6 months to a year.
Listen, I feel for it. That's why we took action immediately when we say, what is the best way to get to the bottom of it? Because let's be clear, so far, as you know, Mr. Massé, what we have is allegation. I need evidence. And that's what we said. The best way for them to do that is not to the management, and I appreciate they may not want. We said we'll hire a third-party law firm. That you won't have to deal with management on that. You can report to them. They'll report to me. And then, to your point, I am willing with this, within the authority of the Act and the contribution agreement, to take any action required. If it requires to change the board, to change, we will do anything that's required. But I need to work on the basis of evidence, and that's what we said to people: bring the evidence forward so that we can have that evidence to take action.
Thank you, Mr. Massey. We're going to go to our second round of questioning. Mr. Cooper, you have 5 minutes. Please start. I'm going to really go tight on the timelines here. Okay, so go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Minister, I just want to clarify an answer that you had provided. Did you say that you do not have possession of a 300-page whistleblower dossier? Did I hear you right?
The department does. I don't.
Have you read it?
No, I don't have possession of it. The department has.
You haven't. You mean to say that you take this very seriously, that you're willing to take whatever action is necessary. You've repeatedly said you're a lawyer, and you haven't taken the time to review the contents of the 300-page.
Well, I'll tell you very simply, you're a lawyer as well. I'm not the fact finder. I'm the minister. There's people who, their job is to do the fact-finding mission. When they provide me with evidence, the only evidence that exists today, Mr. Cooper, I would tell you, is not the allegations that people have brought. Is the report from Raymond Chabot Grant Thornton.
I thought you would have been interested in seeing that evidence as minister. And further to that, Minister, have you met with the whistleblowers?
I don't think it would be appropriate for the minister to meet with whistleblower, because as I would tell you, and you have legal training, the lawyer, I'm not there to do the fact-finding mission. That's why we have a third-party law firm, and we have Raymond Chabot to do that, sir.
You have said that you need evidence. But, Minister, through you, Mr. Chair, there is evidence, and it's contained in the RCGT report, which made findings that are damning, that you are downplaying, including $53,580,000 that was handed out to 3 companies who were ineligible recipients, a further $38.4 million that went out the door as so-called COVID relief payments, which were questionable, and in which of these 21 companies that were looked into, 6 of them involved members of the board who had conflicts of interest, 29% of the companies. So when you say that you need evidence, you have that evidence, and yet you haven't used the tools that you have at your disposal, including Section 10 of the Act, to fire the chair and fire the board.
I would respectfully disagree with that. If you see how it was qualified, Mr. Cooper, as a lawyer, it's called inconsistencies. This is not me. Those are the words of Raymond Chabot. They've not called that violation. And just for your information, let me finish on that, Mr. Chair. What we have demanded as well, but now we welcome the Auditor General. When we see that, we decided to do what was called a recipient audit, Mr. Cooper, because on the basis of that, just let me finish, because you need to go to procedural fairness in order to do that. So when we saw these findings, let me put that, I have called for a recipient audit, which is a full audit of everything under the contribution agreement.
Minister,
but I must just say, when the Auditor General decided to do her own audit, I obviously stopped that work.
I think you've answered the question, Minister. Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Cooper.
I'm going to turn to 2.3.1 with respect to the COVID payments, in which the RCGT report unequivocally states that the corporation's conflict of interest procedures were not followed, and that those members did not recuse themselves.
Yeah, I would, what you're citing, and the report speaks for itself. So, but what I would say, Mr. Cooper, I invite
speak
you.
for itself, and what it speaks to is a pattern of corruption, abuse, and mismanagement.
Well, I hope you will question the board and the chair on that, but I would tell you the rights and obligation. You're a lawyer. I would invite you to read the contribution agreement. It is very specific as to the rights and obligation and the terms of condition of the minister. And if we come to a material breach of the agreement, I can take action. But if you have further evidence through the testimony of people who are going to come here, I tell you, I'm willing to take any and all action that is needed in order to make sure that we get to the bottom of this.
Well, Mr. Minister, we have been in contact with whistleblowers. You said that you want to follow the evidence, and a whistleblower has told us that following submitting the 300-page dossier to your department, that they had volunteered additional documentation and evidence that was refused by your department.
Well, I would,
30 seconds.
If you are in possession of any evidence, Mr. Cooper, as a lawyer, I would ask you to turn it over to us. Then we will look at the evidence. And not only if you don't want to do that, if you can give it to the third-party law firm or the Auditor General, sir.
They offered it to your department.
Well,
it was refused. It's no wonder they say that you and your department are more interested in damage control than getting the answers.
Not at all, Mr. Cooper, because I have said to everyone publicly that I will take any and all action based on evidence. You're a lawyer. You went to law school. I act on evidence, not allegation. If I have evidence of wrongdoing of any form or material breach under the contribution agreement, we will take all action needed, and we'll go to the bottom of this together.
Thank you, Minister. Ms. Khalid, you have exactly 5 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate all of the fancy buzzwords that my Conservative colleagues are using and going in to talk to whistleblowers, et cetera. But Mr. Champagne, can you perhaps go through the timelines and the facts of exactly what has happened with this fact-finding exercise and the SDTC? When did the initial third-party fact-finding exercise start, and what was the goal and scope of this exercise? Let's talk about facts and not buzzwords.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Khalid. I welcome that, and I welcome the work of this committee. Listen, I'm the one who worked, not personally, but I demanded that the department work with the Auditor General. We welcome her work. We work with her for weeks. So we all want the same thing. We want to get to the bottom of this, and if there's evidence of wrongdoing, hey, let's take all the actions needed under the law. That's clear. In terms of the dates, which I think you're right, we need to get back to facts, because there's a lot of allegations of other people, members of the opposition meeting with whistleblower. I am pleased that you're doing that, but I would say there's legal consequences for you to do that. If you have evidence, you have to turn it over so that we can take action on it. But I would say I work on the basis of due process. So on March 5th is the date where I was briefed by the department, and I'm sure to access of information, you'll get access to that brief. And I insisted on the basis of allegations at the time that we do a fact-finding mission. So we hired Raymond Chabot on March 17. They did their investigation until September. On September 27, and you will be happy because that's also going to be as a matter of public record at the time, I was briefed on September 27th of the result of the fact-finding exercise and the proposed next steps. On October 3rd, I demanded that we have a management response and action plan because the allegations we saw in the report or what was presented to us needed a number of corrective action with respect to I would say how certain projects are selected, approved, the eligibility, the funding, the monitoring. So, and in addition to that, you'll be happy, I demanded at the time to the department to conduct a full audit, understanding that the Raymond Chabot Grant Thornton report was kind of an overview of that. And in addition to that, when there was allegation with respect to human resources, we demanded, because just to go back to Mr. Cooper's very thoughtful question, I do not have the right as the minister to involve myself in human resources of an independent organization under the law. We demanded from the board that they grant us full access so that we can get the record, we can get access to the people. We demanded that they waive any restrictive covenants so that people can speak freely to us, and therefore that we can have a law firm to say, if anyone in this group has any contact with any whistleblower or third party which has complained, I would demand that they would go to that law firm. We're about to appoint them. We did the selection process. They're about to be appointed in the coming days so that they can speak freely, provide a report to the minister, and then on the basis of that and the Auditor General's report we'll take all the appropriate steps. And in the meantime, in being a prudent person, as you would know me, in managing public fund, I suspended all fundings. So I said, you know what, until everything is clear, until we have got to the bottom of the issues on funding, as the colleagues have raised, and on the HR, I'm suspending all funding. So to preserve the integrity of the process and defend taxpayers, I said, we'll stop all funding. And, once we clear the mud, we will get back to business. But, there might be needed additional actions. And I can tell you, you've seen in the press, people were even concerned that I would even kind of overstep, but, in a sense, I make sure that we respect the law, the due process, the agreements, so that whatever we do will be fully compliant with the laws and regulation and the terms and conditions.
Thank you, Minister. So you've said that you took action as soon as you learned about it, and you stopped all funding as soon as you learned about it so that the investigation can happen. You've created a proactive regime to ensure that what you're doing as a minister is the right thing to do for Canadians. Can you tell me why that matters to you?
Well, I fundamentally believe that any institution, organization that receive public funding need to be held to the highest standard of governance and respect to human resources practices. We've heard it, at the time, it's not me nor you, but in 2001, Parliament decided to create an arm's length organization. That was the choice.
Thank you, Minister. Monsieur Villemure, vous avez 2 minutes et demie, s'il vous plaît.
J'ai compris tantôt, vous
Thank you. I heard that you are ready to give us a report with Mr. A, Mr. B, Mr. C, Company A, B, C. Can we get that in 24 hours?
Working person that I know said yes, so it should work.
Merci beaucoup. Est-ce que vous pourriez me donner votre...
Can you give me your impression of the allegations at the time? They are very serious, and I took it very seriously. I think that they had spoken to different people about the allegations, and between the 5th and the 17th of March, experts had been hired. Experts do this. You are an expert in ethics. I have powers according to the legislation and the agreement, and I need to allow them to do their own investigation, and then I can act after that. Can you detail the allegations? Because I said I didn't really understand the report. There were elements on the general governance, and I'll be using the Raymond Chabot words. They were talking about inconsistencies and improvement on conflicts of interest, and Mr. Cooper raised a few examples. There was also having to respect all of the clauses in the contribution agreement, how projects are selected, and the board is responsible for approving the different projects. And I think that these are questions that you'll have to ask board members. I apologize for interrupting you. Do you believe that in the document, if somebody removes themselves from the room, that doesn't necessarily remove their influence? I'll try to respond quickly. We need to adopt best practices, like in government. There's proactive disclosure, as you know. There are ways of having firewalls. But I think that all of the work done with your committee is very important. And you know I will not be satisfied as long as all the corrective measures are not taken. Thank you very much.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And go back to where I was before, and excuse my frustration with regards to it, because we can't control right now what's taken place. We clearly have an agency where you've identified, you've cut off their funds. There's a problem. It's supposed to be a very important agency that's done a lot of good work and so forth, but you've ceased and desisted funding them because there's enough there to merit the actions that you've taken place here. And what bothers me still, though, is what we can control is protecting the workers in this environment. Obviously, if they've deviated, even from your own remarks coming in, from the original goals and original type of things that they were doing, we have people here, because of our actions in Parliament here, creating a system where these employees are still vulnerable. So I guess I want to ask again, is there not more that you can do for those people that are currently in this environment right now, if they want to get out, to actually have an equivalent job in the public service somewhere else, because we can control that. And then after this investigation, they're going to have to live with that environment as well, too. So these people, for no fault of their own, just doing what they were supposed to do, and they're getting funded entirely from their jobs and salaries from the federal government and the public, can they not get some type of a better deal to be complicit in terms of the process of healing the environment, and if they want, get out with equivalencies for them and their families? Because we can control that. The other stuff we can't, and it's going to take months and months and months. So that's my appeal.
I feel very strongly for those who came forward, and that's why my answer to that would say, Mr. Massé, so far I need to see evidence, because so far we don't have evidence. That's why I encourage them, and you have contact with them, go to the third-party law firm so that we can hear in a procedural fairness process what they have to say, because so far, you know, there's been reports in the press, there's things left and right, but we need to have evidence. So my point is that on the basis of evidence, what I can assure you, we'll take all the appropriate step to make sure that these employees are treated as they should.
But they presented that. There's enough evidence that you've ceased their funding. But at the same time, you haven't protected the people that are actually in this environment, and their mental health, their family, and all the different repercussions will still exist there. And we have to now depend upon the crutch of a private firm for their future. And so I still don't understand why we can't offer them a better deal in terms of helping clean up this mess and protecting them and their family. That would be a better process.
Yeah, I'm sorry, sir.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay. So we started at 3:47, which means that we've got, in this round, we've got 2 more 5-minute rounds to go. I'm going to go to Mr. Brock and then Mr. Kellaway, and then we'll end this session. Mr. Brock, 5 minutes, please. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. With respect, Minister, I know you started off by trying to brief us on your legal knowledge and trying to give us some legal parameters. But with respect, we don't want to hear about your legal opinion. We want to hear about your political responsibility as minister on this extremely important portfolio. Understood?
Listen, sir, I do my job, and I have a legal background, and I'm very proud of that, and I want to excuse myself to say for the record that I happen to understand these things perhaps better than others, because
you understood the question.
I'm a lawyer and I used to be
managing ethics. Sir, I got limited time. I will move on.
Sir.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. You've heard the concept of ministerial responsibility, right?
I'm very familiar. I've been Minister of the Crown.
Yeah, the buck stops with you.
I totally, but I would tell you.
You keep talking? No, sir. This is my time to talk. I haven't asked you a question. Okay? You talk about, well, you know, that's not my responsibility, and they're going to be doing this review, or they're going to be making those changes, et cetera. But ultimately, they report to you, sir. The buck stops with you. And I know that there is a pattern in this Liberal government of ministers not accepting responsibility. I hope you're going to buck that trend and actually show real leadership and actually accept responsibility for this matter, because this matter has essentially been a year old. These whistleblowers come to the Auditor General and complain, not just one whistleblower, up to 20 whistleblowers, consisting of employees, consisting of senior executives. And I know that the SDTC likes to classify them as just troublemakers, but they're not. They received advice to prepare a 300-page informational package and send that off to the Privy Council office. That was done in February. Now, I understand through your evidence, sir, that you received notice that your department received that report in March, correct? That you did not review that report yourself?
Mr. Chair, can I answer the question that was like 30 seconds? Because, you know, there was a lot in this, by the way. The buck stopped with me as minister, but I would advise you, you might not be a lawyer, but to read the law that says what are the rights and obligations of the minister under the law, and I would advise you to read the terms and conditions of the contribution agreement.
Oh, believe me, sir, I have.
Because as an arm's-length organization, sir, the minister by law is not allowed to manage human resources. That's how the act was created.
I'm not talking about human resources.
That's how the act was created,
I'm not talking about human resources. I'm talking about the misuse of taxpayer money to the tune of $150 million.
Provide me the evidence of that, sir.
You want evidence? Take a look. Take a look at the three.
Provide me the evidence, because the only evidence that exists
one at a time.
Is the Raymond Chabot.
You want evidence, sir?
If you have evidence, provide it to me,
Mr. Brock,
sir.
Minister, just hang on a sec, okay? Let's get one person talking at a time.
You want
here.
evidence?
I understand it's emotional. Mr. Brock, you have the floor. You have the floor. Go ahead.
I suggest if you want evidence, you actually show some responsibility and read that 300-page report, which listed all of the improper payments that went to companies that did not adhere to the contribution agreement number 9 that you keep referring to, that forms the basis of your legal obligations. I encourage you to do that, sir. Or did you, in fact, just receive a briefing from someone in your department about that 300-page report?
With respect, Chair, how can you say that they don't respect the contract? Have you done the forensic audit? I mean, there's people who have done forensic audit. I'm not sure you have done that, but Raymond Chabot did a forensic audit, sir. And that's not the conclusion they reached. That's what I'm saying. You have to work on the basis of evidence and have due process and procedural fairness, sir, because if you're going to say things like that, sir, I'll tell you something. If you're going to say things like that, you have to make sure that what you say is backed by evidence.
Thank you for that advice. Have you ever contemplated why the Auditor General is actually involved?
Yes, because we've been working with them.
Because they feel that you didn't do your job.
That's not at all. Ask them.
All right?
Ask them,
sir. That's exactly what they're saying.
Because we work with them and we welcome their investigation, sir.
People need to be held accountable. People need to be fired. You've done absolutely nothing, despite claiming you're taking this so seriously. You've got your ADM in your own department claiming that you were going to freak out, that changes had to be made, that the board had to be replaced. You did absolutely nothing, sir, between March and October. Did you actually have meetings with your ADM to talk about this issue in that time frame?
Mr. Chair, I would say I work on the basis of evidence. what the member
Sir,
is
did
talking
you
is
have
about
conversations with your
allegations.
ADM?
And I would advise
Mr.
you
Brock,
should take
time
legal
is up.
advice before you make these allegations, sir,
Thank you,
because
Minister.
the only evidence that
Thank
exists
you.
is in the Raymond Chabot report.
Thank you, sir. We're going to Mr. Callaway for 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to talk just a little bit, some observations or some things that have come to my mind during this particular session of committee. I've been on the committee for a very short period of time. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm glad I know a lot of people are. But you don't have to be a lawyer to understand a couple of things. My dad was a coal miner. We would sit around, we would talk politics, we would talk about the issues of the day, and something that you said struck with me that he would used to say. Get to the heart of the issue. Get your facts straight to help people. My dad was in a union. My dad cared about people. My dad cared about helping people around him in his community. When there was a problem in the mines or things weren't being addressed, he would stand up and say, get to the heart of the issue. Get your facts straight. Do the right thing. So I want to kind of not take down the temperature a bit here, because this is a very serious issue. You yourself have said this, and you're the person who ordered the department to go to the Auditor General, if I'm not mistaken. Okay? So I want to walk through for people that are watching at home. You know, when you say heart of the issue, can you explain that to me? When you say do the right way, can you explain that to me?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. It was a heated exchange, but I think we're both passionate about to get to the bottom of this. And I want to recognize the work of the member, Mr. Brock, and all the colleagues. We all want to get to the bottom of this. And I'm the first one who, I must say, from the moment I got any information, and I would really invite the colleagues on the Conservative side, please have other people come testify. You'll see that I'm the first one to take these allegations seriously and to take action. And you should ask around when you have testimony and say who took action. The moment, because I used to do I know that. I don't want to come back to my background, Mr. Brock, but I happen to have done that in my professional life. So I know one or two things about how to conduct these investigations. So the moment we had that, I said, you know, you're guilty as much as an act or an omission. So I said, the moment we're in possession of any allegations, the moment you have that, because they're allegations, there's reputation on both sides. You need to make sure that allegations are then structured. So I said, let's have a forensic audit, not just anyone claiming that there's a breach. You need a forensic audit. And there's experts, there's people who do that for a living. That's why we said, Raymond Chabot, do the forensic audit for us. When they came with that, Mr. Callaway, I was not even satisfied. I said, you know what, we need more of that. And therefore, we have engaged with the Auditor General, and I'm so pleased that she's decided. We've been welcoming that. We've been even saying, why don't we do it together? We wanted to do a full audit of the contribution agreement, as we're allowed under the contribution agreement. And on the human resources side, as to the point of Brian, Mr. Massey said, since I don't have actual, and I accept what Mr. Brock said, the buck stopped with me and everything. I agree with that. But I need to do it in a way which is fair and is sound and legal. I do not have the power under the Act or the contribution agreement to go and take the human resources record of that independent entity that Parliament decided would be independent. I needed to ask the board to give me that. I do not have that power. We said, give us that information. Waive any covenants you have with the employees. Allow people to speak freely. We need to get to the bottom of this. And if you don't, I will make sure you do, because I'll fire you. So they agreed to say, we're gonna get access to that, and then we're gonna get the evidence that is coming. And on the basis of evidence, not allegation, evidence, then we can take appropriate action and say, okay, these allegations have been now proven. We have enough facts to support the decision that we're going to be making. And that's the process. I've been making sure that the employees, to the point of Mr. Massey, are protected, that we do that fairly but swiftly. Because the first thing, and I don't think that's something that my colleagues on the opposition have already said, but I've even suspended the funding pending the investigation to protect public interest. So I feel that we, as minister, I am not the chair of the board. I am not the CEO of this independent organization. I am not the deputy minister, but as minister, I have done everything that I think under the law and the contract that I'm allowed to protect the public interest.
How much time do I have, Mr. Chair?
You have 10 seconds, but I'll give you 20.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, that's some good negotiating. I got an extra 10 seconds. So I just want to give you a chance. I think you highlighted some of this, but what options exist to strengthen the oversight of the SDTC going forward?
Mr. Kellaway, that sounds like a long answer, Minister.
Well, okay, maybe.
If you can answer that in 15 seconds
Well,
or
one or
less, I
two
would
things
appreciate
may not be a long answer, but I take your point.
Well, I would say the management response and action plan touch on certainly governance, talks about ethics, talk about project review, and certainly once they have put that in place, and I've enjoined them to put that in place way before December 31st, so that if it is satisfactory, and I will want a third-party audit that it's satisfactory, then we will restore the funding to the organization, but only when I'm satisfied fully that we've got to the bottom of this, that the Auditor General has got to the bottom of this, and that we come out of this with an organization that has the trust of the people and the employee.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kellaway. Minister, I want to thank you for appearing today, Mr. Kennedy as well. I'm going to dismiss the witnesses, but before I do have a request for a project budget that I'm going to need the committee's approval on for this particular one. The amount requested is $1,750. Do I have approval of the committee? Your hands up for that?
After this, yeah.
Okay. Have approval of the committee? I just need nods. Yes, yes. Cheville Muir. Okay. So there you go, Madam Clerk. And we are, do you have one more thing you need to deal with, Ms. Khalid? Or because we need to adjourn and move into subcommittee. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely, Chair. I just wanted to know, I mean, I know that every single member of this committee has promised that we are going to prioritize the social media study. So I'm just wondering what happened to our witnesses on Wednesday? Where did they go? Did they cancel, or did you cancel on them?
That's part of the discussion that we're going to have at the subcommittee. So I would rather.
I think I would like to know because, Chair, I'm not part of the subcommittee.
You're talking about the social media study?
The social media study, indeed,
Madam
Chair.
Clerk, if you want to, I have no problem discussing this right now, but if you want to advise Ms. Khalid what department officials have said about the social media study and their request to appear before the committee, go ahead, please.
Thank you. And to answer Ms. Kelly, the invitations were sent over the last week to CSIS, to the Center for Cybersecurity, and to Rapid Response Mechanism from GAC. Only one of them was actually emailing me during the meeting, so I'm still trying to call me, so I don't know what the answer is. The two other ones from CSIS and the Center for Cybersecurity said they would not be available as early as Wednesday. They would only be available the week after.
If I may, Chair?
Go ahead.
Are they the only witnesses on our total witness list from all committee members?
No, but we were trying to. No, they're not, but we were trying to prioritize.
That's exactly what I don't understand, Chair, is that I have been waiting and waiting, and I have been put on the back burner. Canadians have been put on the back burner on this very, very important issue, and I get told that, oh, these two people that we invited weren't available on this time, and so we're going to mess around with important committee time just to, I don't even understand what it is that we're trying to achieve here. I had a commitment from you, Chair, personally, on the record, from members on all of this committee on the record, that this is a priority. It's a priority for this committee. It's a priority for Canadians. It's a priority for kids in my riding who are committing suicide on a regular because of what is happening with social media on a daily basis. I'm just not understanding why you're obstructing this, Chair, because and I don't think you are, but I want to know why you are.
Well, I am certainly not obstructing this study. We heard from the committee clerk that invitations were sent out. Those invitations were prioritized, and the response that we got back, in some cases this morning after the invitation was put out last week, was that they were not available and that they would only be available until mid to end November. So I'm not obstructing anything. I'm only going by what the witnesses are telling us after the invitations have been sent out.
Chair,
we're trying.
respectfully, it's been a long time since we've been trying to get this done. If it's okay with you, Chair, I'd love to see a list of all of the witnesses that the whole committee has proposed, who's been invited, and what that schedule is looking like right now. Because at this point in time, I don't think that it's the witnesses that are at fault at this time.
Okay.
I think that we need to do better as a committee to ensure that we are doing the work that Canadians are expecting us to do, rather than having committees like the one we had today, and just having a subcommittee meeting in the second hour where we could have spent a whole hour listening to experts on what these issues are, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I just want to confirm, Madam Fortier, did you have the witness list, and did you share that with Ms. Khalid, because it was distributed?
Witness list, but not the who has been invited, though. I don't know who's been invited.
Exactly.
We do have a witness list, but not who's been invited.
Go ahead, Mr. Barrett.
Yeah, so, Chair, I saw that we had a subcommittee meeting scheduled for the second hour today, which my understanding was that was at the request of Liberal members to have a subcommittee meeting. So this last week, and so Chair, if I'm going to be shouted down by ICRA,
Please correct
she
the
wanted
record,
to have a
Mr. Barrett. That
subcommittee
is not
meeting,
true.
and instead she's grandstanding. She just said we had a minister of the
Chair, if there's anybody who knows what grandstanding looks like, it is that member right
We had a
there.
minister of the Crown
Talk to me
here.
about grandstanding, Mr.
We had a
Barrett.
minister of the Crown here, and she said it's
I've got a
unimportant.
point of
She
order.
says
Talk
it's
to me about
unimportant.
grandstanding,
She
Mr.
says it's
Barrett. Tell me
unimportant.
how we can go on a
Please
Facebook
stop.
Live
I
right
think this
now.
is stop. Both of you
well,
stop.
I mean,
Let's do it.
there
Bring out
was-
your Facebook Live, Chair.
if you don't want to be held accountable for shutting down a
Mr.
meeting
Barrett,
with the
Mr.
RCMP
Barrett,
Commissioner,
I'm going to ask you to stop,
then you shouldn't
please.
do it. Then you shouldn't do it.
Stop. Ms. Khalid, I'm going to ask you to stop.
If you don't want to stand by your actions,
The motion that Mr. Barrett is
then don't.
referring to
Then don't act that
was
way.
a motion that was passed last week to have a subcommittee meeting as soon as possible. Given the circumstances of the extra hour that was available to us this afternoon, I'm fulfilling the committee's wish on that motion to have a subcommittee meeting. That's how this came up.
So they did want a subcommittee
No,
meeting.
that is absolutely incorrect, Chair. I would hope that you would correct the record on Mr. Barrett on this. This is absolutely false. I am sick and tired of these lies that these conservatives are pushing forward in our committees every day.
Then let's not have the meeting.
There are no more lies from you, Mr. Barrett.
I just explained the circumstances surrounding the subcommittee meeting,
and
those are the facts.
Chair, if she's going to be yelling about people lying, which she just did.
Mr. Barrett, I'm going to ask you to stop, please.
Chair, she just specifically said that I was lying.
I'm asking both of you to stop.
Mr. Barrett just put out a Facebook Live to put the
I'm asking both of you to stop.
Putting our lives and our...
I'm going to suspend the meeting. Meeting suspended. Règlement.
Point of order, Mr. Villemur. I think that it should take precedence on discussions. When I raised my hand, interpretation could not follow because everyone was talking on top of each other.
Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Villemur.
Mr. Barrett.
Yeah, this meeting has become completely unproductive. We had committee business that was scheduled to discuss the agenda of the committee. If it can't be done productively and it's resulting in the kind of conduct we've seen from members on the Liberal side, I move to adjourn the meeting.
Okay, we've got a motion to adjourn the meeting, non-debatable, and I'm going to see whether we have approval for that on a unanimous basis. Mr. Massey, do you approve? It's to adjourn and move to subcommittee. That's where we're going next.
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
Okay,
This is
Mr.
not
Villemur?
functional. Thank you.
Okay, Madame Fortier, en accord?
It is gracious.
Say that again.
On va faire le sous-comité.
Okay, merci.
We'll move to subcommittee.
Meeting is adjourned.